today. Okay, guys, before we start this event, let us pray accordance with trust respectively. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this rewarding event for all of us, and the event will run smoothly and conducive. Pray start. Okay, amen. Okay, before we enter the core of our activity today, I will explain the agenda here today. The first is presentation from Dr. Ivan. I think it's we need 30 minutes. Is it enough, Dr. Ivan? Okay. And then our discussion, we need maybe student. Would you please if 30 minutes for our discussion today with Dr. Ivan? Okay. Okay, thank you, Dr. Ivan. I think I invite Dr. Ivan in here, yeah, for our guest lecture today. I give the opportunity for Dr. Ivan for deliver his presentation. Okay, you can start, Dr. Ivan.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Daisy from Universitas Muhammadiyah in Jogja, in Yogyakarta. So thank you very much for inviting or actually doing this session, especially, and of course, I hope everyone is in good health also this afternoon. And yeah, this afternoon I'm going to share a bit on some important applied econometrics or empirical analysis that is important for especially to deal with time series analysis, where you have time series data. So these are some of the techniques or some of the idea behind of time series analysis that should be known by everyone, right? So I try as much as possible to keep the time into 30 minutes. I have numbers of slides here. I would share the slide later. I'll put in the chat box through my to link to some of the resources that I did for my for this particular afternoon. So of course the topic is related of what I've been saying just now, co-integration and VAR or vector autoregressive. And of course, to add on something, on stationarity also, because it's related when we model the econometric modeling understanding. So before going into the topic itself, these are two models in econometrics, especially that is rather important. Perhaps let me go through the second slide. Yeah, this one is just an understanding of econometrics of what is it. So what is this? When we talk about time series, just a basic idea. When we talk about time series, time plays an important role. The time t plays an important role, and of course, when we talk about the idea of time, I always refer time perhaps as a very simple example. Time is today. And then t-1 would be yesterday, for example, and that's where we have this type of model. If we have this kind of model, we call it AR model or autoregressive, which is what we are doing here. And if we have this type of model, where you have x t-1, where from this simple OLS regression, then we call it DL model or distributed lag model. If you combine both, it's called AR-DL, but there's something beyond this lecture, but something we can discuss later if you have any of the question and so on. So, but through this my presentation, if you have any question, please do stop me anytime, or you can put, of course, in the chat box, or you can ask later. I mean, some of the question in mind, some of the applied side, not just the theory side, but more to the applied side. So the idea behind co-integration, stationarity, and VAR have gone back in the econometric modeling, especially about 40 years or more than 40 years. Started off, of course, it started off somewhere in 1970 from the publication of Box and Jenkins, which is from ARIMA, Box and Jenkins, 1970, ARIMA, Box and Jenkins, and then after that until today, which is actually more than 40 years, of course, 50 years counting. And with that publication, 1970, and then we have 1974, which is called the important article called Granger and Newbold, 1974, that talks about spurious regression or nonsense regression. And then after that, in 1981, Cliff Granger come up with the idea of co-integration. And at almost the same time, in 1980, Christopher Sims come out with VAR, or vector autoregressive, of what we have today, especially in econometric modeling, not just for economic study, but in any types of study, as long that we have the time series data. So the revolution start there. So and of course, the idea before 1970, the testable econometric modeling is different, and after 1970, the revolution changed until today, and there's a lot more development of this econometrics and so on, right? And one of the most important fact for macroeconomics, especially, or the time series variable, is what we call as non-stationary. So what is non-stationary is something that we're going to discover in the next few slides. And of course, I want to give you the idea behind who were the person behind of this, especially the terms co-integration. What's the terms co-integration we're going today? Well, he, of course, with Robert Engel and Cliff Granger won the Nobel Prize in 2003, 20 years ago, that talks about co-integration for the method of analyzing economics time series with common trend, of course, because they are in economics, so it's economics data. But like I said just now, as long that the data is time series in nature, from one period of time to the other period of time, it doesn't matter what, whether you're in finance, business, even in medical field, biology, and so on and so on. As long the data is time series, you can adopt this method. And it's proof that this method is reliable because they won the Nobel Prize back on this method of co-integration. It's something that I want to bring you into this picture. So of course, it started off in 1970 onwards. It talks about non-stationarity, and almost the same time also the publication of the first formal publication of unit root testing, where you test stationary or non-stationary variables somewhere in the late 70s. So this is all the idea revolution come into that picture at that particular time. So Cliff Granger is there. This is from his lecture not my lecture, this is from his lecture of Nobel Prize received award day on December 8, 2003, 20 years ago, like I say. What is important here, it says here, I would point out this part, right? In some area of application, of course, econometrics, because they are very much economics itself. So for example, biology will produce biometrics, psychology will produce psychometrics, and economics will produce econometrics, in the sense that we gain together what is actually in understanding what is actually econometrics, although this is not the basic part, is that if I draw these three simple diagram, if with this is maths, I just write that maths, this is statistic, and this is economics theory. It can be any theory, as long as the maths and statistics is there. This part of it, the integration of these three, is called econometrics, and that is where we lies all the other theory of econometrics and so on and so on. in this sense. If it's finance, then they call it financial econometrics, or it can be business econometrics and so on, and those wording there that being used, right? And like I already told you just now, we started off back in 1970, and then after that, Granger and Newbold, 1974, you have Davidson 78, Henry and Mizon 78, Paulser, and then all these important person, and this is another important article. Nelson and Paulser says that macroeconomics variable using this test of Unit Road 1979 prove that the variable are mostly I1. What is I1? I1 means that they are non-stationary variable. Non-stationary, just a simple idea behind of non-stationarity, which I go into the next slides of what is the meaning of stationary. Stationary means that the mean is constant over time, variance is constant over time, and simple correlation between x and xt minus k depends on the lag length, but not other variables. So if it's not constant, the variance not constant, the mean not constant, the correlation is also depending on other variable, then it's not considered as stationary. So for example, a simple example like this, right? A very simple example of this graph, of this simple graph, they going up, have a trend, or sometimes we call it, the econometrician, statistician call it stochastic trend, is that if you have this type of graph, we call it non-stationary variable. If you, of course, if you have this type of graph, simply this graph can be easily understood in the sense that you can plot, for example, GDP. You can plot any other variables, any other macroeconomic variable, exchange rate, interest rate, and so on and so on. But especially in this sense, if you plot GDP, you look that GDP is going up, not the growth rate, but the current price GDP and all the other, macroeconomic. So in this sense, this is the finding in 1970s, says that the variable is actually non-stationary. And what we do before that, before 1970 methods are actually not correct, because we do not take into consideration of the properties or the characteristic of this variable, which is non-stationary. So it's wrong when we don't consider this understanding, and that's the understanding behind what non-stationarity are doing. If I go back a bit to the slide here, and since then, 74, 80, 82, and then we have 1987, and so on and so on. These have been the standard procedure if you use especially time series analysis, right? Especially if you use time series analysis, this is the standard procedure that been adopted today in all the research paper published on time series analysis. This is already the standard procedure until today, 2023. Means that you have to check for stationarity of the variable, the properties, and then after that, you apply co-integration, which is our topic of interest. And then, of course, you can do all this modeling like ECM, VECM, Granger causality, and so on and so on. This again, like I told you, this is the standard procedure we adopted in a lot of research paper today, which I'll share some of you. With some papers later in a while. So this is non-stationary. This is stationary. I always give what's the best example of stationary graph that is stationary would be like how our heartbeat, our own heartbeat, right? Our own heartbeat inside our heart beating every second, every minute of the day. If we measure that our heartbeat supposedly to be stationary. When I say stationary, it doesn't mean that our heartbeat is like this. If it's like this, then you have a problem. Then we have a big problem if our heart beat like this. But stationary means that if you draw a line here, it is fluctuate around this mean, or mean zero. It fluctuate around the mean, which coming back to the definition just now of stationarity, the mean is constant over time, the variance is constant over time, especially. So it fluctuates around that mean. Not like the previous graph just now, is moving upwards or moving downwards, right? It fluctuates around the mean. The best example, one of the best example that I could give would be what our own heartbeat is. Heartbeat normally are stationary. And if it's not stationary, also it's an issue. Of course, if it's not stationary because maybe we go for a jogging, we go for a run, we go some exercise, then it fluctuates a bit higher, right? Like right now, me following what I have, my smartwatch says here my heartbeat is 79. So it's a little bit higher than normal of 72, but perhaps because I'm talking and moving around my hand, so it's about that figure is so that's the example of stationary series. And based on this graph, which I'm going to, based on this particular graph, despite that both of the blue color graph and the red color graph are non-stationary because they are upward trending, and not just upward trending, but they can go down and then go up again, but they seems to be moved together, right? They clearly, from the graph itself, is clearly non-stationary. Of course, you have to prove it statistically. But this non-stationary seems to have moving together. When these simple things called move together is actually what the theory of co-integration coined out, co-integration idea. We started off in 1974 by Cliff Granger and Paul Newbold, a 1974 publication that talks about spurious correlation or spurious regression. And then after that, Granger itself extended the explanation into what we know today as co-integration. That's from the linear point of view. And of course, non-linear and so on, threshold and everything else have been updated from time to time. But the idea behind is coming from him at that particular time. And of course, the famous article of Granger and it's actually Engel and Granger, 1987, that talks about co-integration, the important article of co-integration, or the literature known as EG article, or in EG, Engel and Granger 1987, becoming an important reference for anyone that want to explore the theory behind co-integration. But the idea actually very simple, like I put up in this slide just now. It's just actually to see what Granger believe is that despite that they are non-stationary, that they found earlier on in 70, 71 and so on, but they seems to have moved together. There seems to have a common trend that ties them together into a direction, into the direction itself. So this can be considered like a journey. But this journey of these two variables bring together towards a direction that they want to achieve. In that example, I would often give also in the class and to a lot of my participants, saying that in that particular regards, we are saying that despite that the two variables or the three variables or the four variables are non-stationary, but this variable actually form a common stochastic trend. The word is common stochastic trend. Stochastic because the variable are stochastic. Common stochastic trend that binds them together. So what binds them together is the concept called co-integration, right? Like perhaps all of us in this room right now, it's about 15 of us in this room, small but significant. The 15 of us here form a co-integration type and so on, moving together towards a direction, while of course listening to my storyline here. And I also often give another example of if it's this applied to especially the students, I would say that everyone in the class especially have one aim and one direction that they want to achieve, which is graduation, to finish up the studies, graduation, whether it's S1 3 years, whether it's S2 perhaps 2 years, or S1 in Indonesia is 4 years, in Malaysia is 3 years, depending on the course. and S3 PhD, perhaps 3 to 5 years kind of duration. So everyone aim for the graduation or convocation itself, graduation itself, right? And that is the aim for everyone. So everyone moving in the same direction of that road to graduation, the journey to graduation. And that journey to graduation actually binds every one of you together like this. That form what I call, what my understanding is called co-integration. So everyone are co-integrated because they are moving towards the same direction, despite that each of us are different, have a different way of study, have a different way of performance and everything else. But we have one aim, one similar aim, that is convocation if it's for the student, right? So this is a little bit of the history of co-integration. And of course, if co-integration exists, then we say that the variables are co-integrated. That's the idea behind it. And like I said just now, I already explained this part just now. The key point is that genuine long-run relationship between X and Y, although the variable will rise over time because they are trended, they have common trend that link them together. What's the common trend? What's the common thing that applies for everyone? They're students, for example. So they form a long-run relationship. Equilibrium or or co-integration normally are terms into long-run and equilibrium, right? That is the simple terms behind of the link between co-integration and so on. So if the variables are co-integrated, then they form the long-run relationship. Of course, I already mentioned just now the concept. Bring forward here 1981, 87, and then you have Engel and Yule. 87, Stock and Watson, 88, Johansen, Julius Johansen should be 1988 here. Johansen 1988, 1991, 1995, and a lot more of this second generation, third generation co-integration and so on. ARDL 2001, and all the non-linear version of the co-integration that exists after that. But the basic idea was bring forward by Engel itself. And in Engel speech itself, it says that what he did was, Johansen says also, what they did was in linear form. Any non-linear extension is allowed because it's the same idea, just to extend the model into non-linear fashion. That's all. That's to bring up the non-linearity. You want to do whether to extend it to threshold, to even the quantile, and so on and so on, and all the others that is there, even that the concept, the simple concept of co-integration is there, right? And this is what I mentioned just now, to repeat it again. A time series of X and Y are said to be co-integrated of order D and B, written as like this. Both series are integrated, and then of order D and B, there exists a linear combination of these variables, that they are linked together. In that sense, what binds them together? The same aim, the journey, what they aim in the future, right? That binds them on, and what we call here is co-integration. And of course, it's called co-integrating vector in that particular regards. So that's the basic idea behind our co-integration here. All right. And that's the first part of it, right? The second part, the extension. Again, the extension that happens just now, 1981, is co-integration. That the first co-integration methods come out. The first co-integration methods come out 1987, was built upon Engel-Granger was built upon residual best test of co-integration. Residual best means that a single equation, we test X and Y, and then we test another time Y and X, we obtain the residual, we test whether the residual is I0 or stationary. If the residual are stationary, we say that Y and X are co-integrated. So that's the basic idea of co-integration itself. And then at the same time, in 1980, especially Sims, Christopher Sims, in 1980 actually provide another framework called macroeconometrics, which put into econometrics into macroeconomics, especially macroeconomics modeling of the idea called VAR. AR is something basic since before 1970, even have AR, as long you have YP minus 1 in the variable, independent variable, which is have, for example, like this alpha plus beta x, and then you plus this variable, that is already considered an AR. But the extension of VAR means that rather than look into one equation by itself, they extended into 2 or 3 more equations, 4 or 5 more equations into a much more bigger equations, sets of equation in a matrix form called vector. And that's we test them together at the same time. We call it VAR. If you test them individually, we call it only AR model. And of course, this have been there. And this method, especially Christopher Sims and of course Thomas Sargent, in that sense, they won the Nobel Prize 2011 for this method. That especially Christopher Sims, as I mentioned just now, VAR in 1980, and he only won Nobel Prize 2011 after 30 years, 30 years when people adopted this method. Right, and what I tried to link between co-integration and VAR just now, co-integration analysis at first was brought forward by Engel and Granger, or Granger itself in 1981, only looking into 2 variables, bivariate. But with the VAR, with the VAR by Christopher Sims and of course Thomas Sargent bring into the forward, going into much more detail, especially on monetary policy and related, and macroeconomics, of course, it allows the co-integration theory to expand into VAR concept. The VAR concept, not just the 2 variables bivariate system and so on and so on, right? Not just the bivariate 2 variable system, but now we can allow 5, 10 variable tests together at the same time to ensure that there's an interaction, dynamic interaction between all the variables. So what we want to find is actually not just between X and Y, but between X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, E, all those variables together at the same time, which will be very important for policy implication of any government, any central banks, or perhaps us as a researcher to know that we put in this variable, we see the interplay of the variables. The word I use, the word interplay, means that the dynamic interaction between the variables, whether X cos Y, Y cos X, Y impact X, and so on and so on. X cos Y, X, there's another method called Granger causality, of course, same thing by Granger. And this is, of course, Christopher Sims that bring forward this idea behind of VAR that enable the model extended from the bivariate into vector, into the matrix, to see the macroeconomic matrix, especially the cause and effect in the economy, has been mentioned inside this slide. And this is a sneak peek of what Christopher Sims developed. It's called VAR, and to analyze the economy and to see whether it's temporary change, economic policy factors, and so on, has been well managed, has been used until today as one of the significant methods that ties with co-integration. So now co-integration, you have long-run relationship. Put in the VAR, this is a perfect combination that happens in the 80s until today. The methods, although there's of course the non-linear family come into that, the extension and so on, but the structural VAR and the Bayesian VAR and so on and so on, a lot more that has been extended after that. And it's a very simple model because it's systematic, of course, for forecasting, and very simple and emphasized because it's just extended something like this. This is just an example of application that I found out. Some of the application, of course, we know that, as I mentioned just now, as long as the data is there, time series, we can adopt the system. This one, for example, the first article is in medicine, the second article is in epistemology, and the third article, of course, economics that I'm in, and biology, macroeconomics. All other fields, as long the data is there, use that method VAR, although some of it is actually using structural VAR as VAR. But the idea, still the basic, is VAR itself, that the evolution not only precisely for economics. No, this method is not just dedicated to economics. No, it's not true. If anyone says that, then that person is wrong. these methods can be adopted to any other field as long the data that used is time series. Same thing goes to any other methods. It cannot be exclusively just for that particular field. We are living in the world today where multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary is possible. So that's where we're supposed to go. I mean, the field that we're going into. This is just example just now. This is the first article, how a vital sign in respiratory passion dynamically related system. Interesting, between heart rate, respi, blood pressure, and SpO2. This is what I'm trying to say just now. They use that as a study. Heart rate, our respi rate, our blood pressure, and our SpO2 is related to oxygen. You just learned that terms because of the pandemic, but it's good to know. They publish this, and it's related. They use VAR. They use vector autoregressive. I do not. I have the full paper. If you're interested to read, of course, it's all in my folder that I'm going to share with you. So this is rather interesting. And the second study just now was about, of course, about the COVID-19, but related to epistemology just now. They published in one of the journals. And they have the data. They use multivariate vector autoregressive, again, time series model, the first article, second article. And the third one is also related, that use VAR, vector autoregressive model, that adopted in different fields. This is in biology. And this is one of my articles that published some time ago in 2016, 2017, I think. The paper out in 2017, accepted 2016. That related, my topic related to suicide and socioeconomic determinants in Canada that use VAR also. We have 39 years data from Canada with some of my co-authors from Malaysia and outside Malaysia that look into suicide, look into socioeconomic factors of Canada that adopted the method, co-integration, VAR, and so on. So, this is more to socioeconomics and, of course, economic field. And another study that they adopted with one of my PhD students from Indonesia itself, that talks about West Kalimantan Sarawak border trade on using gravity model, published here in 2019. And the data, which is important, border trade between Sarawak and Indonesia here in the place that I am, using some time series analysis, co-integration, unit root co-integration, and then Granger causality and whatnot related to that, right? That we're using. The second paper, and of course, just now when we talk about VAR, the simple extension. The simple extension will be something like this. The simple extension will be like this, right? The VAR, the simple, this is two variables. So it looks something like this. In the system, it looks something like this. And of course, my next few slides will be also some intuition behind. This is one, and then we extend that to two equation, three equation means that two equation means that two variable, three equation means that of course three variables, and of course not only that, you have the lag. This is more towards the lag, whether we have AR1, AR2, AR3, VAR1, VAR2, VAR3. And when I talk about, this is one interesting article that I found yesterday. They have article like this, a conversation with Soren Johansen. Soren Johansen is the one that extended the model of co-integration, Engel-Granger co-integration into the VAR system, the multivariate system of co-integration by Johansen. And then after that, Johansen and Jussilis, 1988, Johansen, 1990, Johansen and Jussilis, and then they are extended also a lot of that. They talk about this is like the interview of with Soren Johansen on how he developed the idea behind, and talks about time series of I1, I2, and this one is inside there. So that's why I'm moving into, and this idea of Johansen, Jussilis actually bring forward the VAR into the system, the VAR idea, because it's in the system, co-integration, extended from Engel and Granger. This is Johnson and Jusillis. And then, of course, in JJ test or Johnson and Jusillis, we have two tests called threat statistic and maximum eigenvalue. I do not want to go into much of the detail because it's available here in the slide and all the readings is out there. And this is several implications that you can read through. And of course, several more papers that I published, this one in 2019, that also adopt all this method. This is more towards crime, economics of crime, economics of deterrence in Malaysia especially. And this case study or this data was collected based on Sarawak, not just the whole country, but based on the state, Sarawak here. Right, and another paper that published some time ago, about 10 years ago, they published on hungernomics, combine the word hunger and economics, and talks about food trade sustainability, also in Sarawak, they published 2013. And this another interesting study that we published, me and my student published on childbearing or fatality and determinants using the same method, co-integration analysis and VECM. Because we have time series data and a lot more other studies. Actually, I found this also yesterday, based on an Indonesian study, and talk about the famous EKC and published in Sustainability. These are few papers. And towards the end, I think while I'm sharing just now mostly of the idea of co-integration and then the idea of VAR that brought forward from the literature since late 70s and then 80s and so on. And then these are one of the software that is available out there that can be used to do the estimation. Of course, there's a few more other software. You can use eViews. eViews today have gone through revolution from eView 1 up to eView 13. Now the latest one is eView 13. I use this a lot, eViews. I use another program called Microfit, and of course some others like R has been developed there, R, and then you can use also Python, you can use Stata and a lot more others. A program to estimate such a relationship is available in all those programs today, all those software today, apps today. And this is towards the end. You can always watch for the application, for some of the videos that adopted this method, explanation and so on. You can go to my YouTube channel, and some of the videos is there. Like I say, I'll share these slides. So of course, you can watch there and all the other resources that is available out there that talks about this method and adoption. In my video, especially the first two video here is dedicated towards the application hands-on in eViews, which anyone can watch, because as long as you have the link, you can watch the video. And this is the channel that I have in YouTube, actually that dedicated to students, but anyone also can watch because it's a way that I show to my student how to do such a methodology and so on. So, and I try to, I keep my time, but it's a little bit extra. 40 minutes already now. Thank you very much again for the opportunity. This is a very short explanation, but I hope you get something from here. And if it's any question related here, please do ask me. Thank you very much, Dr. Desi. I pass back to you. Thank you.
Okay, very interesting explanation from Dr. Lau, Ivan Lau. Thank you very much, Dr. Ivan. And the next, I want to give opportunity for my students who maybe wants to give or asking to Dr. Lau, who will give questions. Maybe you can raise your hand and don't forget to introduce yourself, please. Okay. Who will give some? Okay, in chatting room, I will In the chat room, there some question? Okay, Muhammad Zian. Zian,
Okay, sir, sorry, I have one question. And then sorry if because in my laptop the sound is not clear. I wanna ask if how to test the Ranger casualty in the farm model, sir. Thank you.
okay, thank you, Muhammad Zian. The resource for, okay, the resource for Dr. Lau presentation, there any on the chat room? Yeah.
Yeah, I shared all the I share my the resources, means that the presentation, the slide, and all the other relevant article that I showed just now in my slide is all here. Right. I got going back to the question just now. Thank you for asking me that important question, Zian. I hope there's a good question, how to test granular causality, because there's something that I do not explain here in that sense. How to test? I would simply say that it's just like how you would just or if I say that use eViews, I would just say that you just click on the necessary button. But before click on the necessary button, you have to understand the idea behind VAR. Of course, just now I explained the simple VAR. Let's say you have 5 variables. Let's say you test for five variable VAR. After you estimate this VAR 5 variable, and the next step is for you to test this variable cost this variable cost this variable, and so on and so on. So to test them, of course, it's just a simple steps inside eViews, just to click, and then there's a button of granular causality, and then they will come up all the results at the same time. You will not testing two variable by itself. That is different. That is bivariate causality. You have to test them 5 together at the same time. All right. Of course, if you watch my video, I have the hands-on there on the eViews itself. I mean, based on the slides that I have. And to know more, actually, I'm not sure whether I'm answering you in the correct manner. If you I'm using that simple understanding of testing the VAR, actually, you can test all the variables and to see the causality between the interaction between all the variables. I hope I answer you that. How to test? You need to explore eViews and with a proper guidance and so on. And yeah, I hope I answer you that one, Zian. If you have any more questions, please do ask.
Okay.
I have question.
Okay.
Doctor
Yes,
Diana.
Diana.
Yeah, I have question. I run the panel data model is combination between the cross-sectional and time series. So it's compulsory for me to run the co-integration test. That's
Okay. Is enough your question? Okay. Thank you, Diana, for your question.
All right. Thank you very much, Diana. That is it's also the extension from what we discussed here in this particular room today of co-integration and the other one VAR. But of course, the extension, as I told you, since the beginning of Engel and Granger, Granger is served to Johansson, and then the data estimation or this method have been extended into panel analysis also. So this is my advice. This is my advice. It depends on what types of panel you are seeing. There's 2 types of panel, especially in this regards, based on my understanding, based on what I understand, based on my econometrics understanding. Is that 2 types of panel. One type is called it short panel. The other one is called long panel. So which type of panel that you adopt? That's the question, right?
Short,
how
doctor.
to know how to create short panel.
Short panel.
Short panel means that your n is larger than t.
Yes.
N is your cross section is larger than the t, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay, if that is the case, of short panel, most of the time you don't have to apply the stationary cointegration and so on, or VAR, or panel VAR, and or even the what that method, the Pedroni, and not Pedroni, sorry, the never mind. It did not come into my mind right now. If we have the short panel, normally we go into panel regression. For example, the simplest one will be the POLS, called pool OLS, ordinary least square, and then or you can adopt the random effect and fixed effect. Panel random effect, panel fixed effect, or you can go a little bit if you want to see the dynamics between the interaction between the variables, then you go GMM, you can go IV, you can go fully modified OLS and related. So panel regression, if you have short panel. If you have long panel, your time series, the T is larger than the N, then you can explore panel unirode, panel cointegration, panel causality, panel VAR, and all the related. So there are two types of application there. Right, so that's the advice I can give you for now, Diana. Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Lau. There any question from Abdi Hakim Muhammad? Is Abdi Hakim Muhammad? You can give some question.
Okay.
Please.
Assalamualaikum. I'm Abdi Hakim. I wanna ask you two questions. The first question, how we can differentiate the stationary series and non-stationary series, and please give us an example of both of them to understand clear. And the second question is, most of the macroeconomic variable are non-stationary, as you mentioned on the article, and also they contain unit root, while the stationary series, they are not contain unit root. So why unit root is important for the non-stationary only? So that's my second question.
Okay.
Thank you, Abdi Hakim.
Thank you very much for the question. I'll try to answer this particular question first, and then we will the question is actually, the two questions is actually related, that talks about stationary and non-stationary. I just now in my presentation, I already give the example of what is stationary and what is non-stationary. I hope perhaps it's not clear. So I repeated back what I'm trying to say just now, is that stationary series will be something like our heartbeat. Listen to our own heartbeat. That is stationary. It means that it's constant. The word is constant all the time, and the mean and variance are constant all the time. Constant doesn't mean a straight line. Doesn't mean a straight line if you plot. It means that it fluctuates around a mean and fluctuate around a figure. Mean is if the mean is 0, assuming the mean is 0, then it fluctuates around the 0 mean. It's I mean, that sense the variable that is a constant over time because it's time series. That is stationary. A non-stationary series will be, if you plot any variable, for example, like GDP, you plot money supply, you plot exchange rate, you plot stock market, even stock market, and so on and so on. That when the graph is going up or going down, like a demand curve or supply curve in the theory or in economics theory, then that is called non-stationary. It's called non-stationary because they have trend going up and trend going down. And up and down is that. That's the idea. So stationary, why does it matter? Stationary and non-stationary in that sense, why does it matter in this kind of modeling? Because that idea was brought forward in 1970s. Until today, we're still testing it until today. We still find, because a simple understanding of stationary and non-stationary is because with non-stationary, the word normally used is stochastic trend. The stochastic trend means that the trend that might not be able to be predicted. So it's hard to do the modeling if you do not be able to predict. That's the stochastic trend. That's include what the understanding of unit root, content and unit root in that sense of the non-stationary series itself. So with the stochasticness, not just in the error term, but now in the variable itself, that is difficult actually to use the model before 1970 to do the prediction, to do the proper modeling. But with this understanding, with this derivation in terms of mathematical formula and statistical analysis that are available after that, then we can test them. But first we have to understand, we have to know that each of the variable, we have to test each variable individually, whether they are stationary or non-stationary. And then only we decide what methods that is suitable. Whether should we go co-integration? Should we go other methods? Should we go back to the OLS? Should we go back to just VAR, VECM, structural VAR, or whatever that's available out there? So you have the option, but first must test each variable first, whether there's I0, I1, whether there are I2 variable, whether or they are combination, they are mixture of I1, I2, or I1, I0, or up to I2, whether we still can adopt co-integration or whether we still can adopt VAR. That's the question here, whether that's suitable or not, right? So I think I also indirectly answer the question inside the chat box in that sense of I1, I0 itself. But I hope I answer you this part for this particular question. The Hakim Muhammad. Okay, right? And in the chat box, I continue on, Dr. Desi. All right. In the chat box, there's a question written there by Li Yi if the question is very straightforward, if my DV dependent variable is I1 and my IV is one is I0, one is can I use VAR and so on and so on? Yeah, that's the technology, the methodology advancement allows this type of understanding there right now. If you ask this question in 1970, then you say the answer will be no, or in 1980. But now it's yes. Means that even you have a mixture of variables, like I say, at the beginning you have to test the variable characteristic. Of course, there's a lot of unit root testing. Unit root tests starting from Dickey and Fuller, and then you have Philip Perron, and then you have KPSS, you have Perron, you have a lot more other methods that is only linear, non-linear also have, and then you have with structural break and so on and so on. Which tests that actually prove that your variable is actually I0 or I1? How many tests that have you done? First question that I can throw back to you. But the question is that if really your variable is a mixture of I1 and I0, yes, we still can use VAR, but the how we treat the VAR is no longer the level types of VAR, like the normal types of VAR. We can use first different VAR, FD, first different VAR. We first different the VAR, and then the solution will be short run because it's first different in this sense. It's no longer the common VAR result. But this is allowed in this sense. Or if let's say there's a mixture of I1, I0, some would go ahead with a method called ARDL co-integration approach. If you use that method, then we do not go VAR anymore because VAR is a system. ARDL is a single equation by itself. But of course, with the technological advancement, some would you still can test the Granger causality because it's formed in a different way, but in the different way, not necessarily in VAR and so on. So I hope my explanation here do not confuse you more. But what I'm trying to give you here is that even you have a mixture of I1, I0, VAR is still possible, but you have to treat the VAR differently. You have to treat the VAR differently. That's your first question. The second question is that is VAR available for small sample? this one very, the question small sample is very subjective. Small sample for you, small sample for me, and everyone else might be different. What is small sample? Is 30 small sample, 30 observation small sample? Is 50 small sample or 100 small sample considered small sample? So it depends on what you try to do, and it depends on your what types of data that you're looking into, whether it's quarterly, whether it's a monthly data, whether it's a yearly data, and so on. Right? And it depends on what you're trying to do. So well, now you added up another question there. Use ARDL review says the method is too old. Well, and then you should explore nonlinear and ARDL, which is beyond ARDL itself. If you don't want to go VAR, this is what I can comment. I think perhaps the reviewer a little bit confused when they say it's too old. The VAR Granger non-causality, multivariate VAR Granger causality. Not sure what method is that. Is that the Toda Yamamoto method, 1995, or the normal VAR method, which is actually 1980. So it's longer than, it's actually older than the ARDL. ARDL officially published in 2001. So I'm not sure what's the aim of doing that. But to answer your reviewer, not answering, to answer back to what the reviewer are doing, is that you have to test, and then you have to see the different, perhaps the reviewer want you to see, want you to present the different sets of results. Is that, I hope I answer you that question, right? So thank you very much for that particular question.
Okay, very interesting our discussion today. There any your student here? I'm so sorry, I'm forget to read the chat box, Dr. Evan Lau, but I think it's no problem because the question have to read, yeah, from Li Yi. So I think Li Yi, I hope your question, you are not confused again, yeah. Your question have to read by Dr. Evan Lau. Okay. Thank you very much for our discussion today, Dr. Evan Lau. There
Yes.
any question again? I give
There's one last.
the last question. Yes.
Yeah. I think Yap, raise up your hand. Yeah.
I have a
Yes.
question.
Oh,
Actually, I'm one of
okay.
the ex-student of Dr. Evan Lau.
Okay. Please
You should teach me. You teach me. Yeah.
introduce. Oh, okay. Okay.
So
Introduce yourself.
yeah, currently I'm from USM, and previously I
Okay.
was in UNIMAS, which I'm a ex-student from Dr. Evan Lau. So actually, I have a question. In
Yes.
currently, there is a popular method which called the connectedness approach, which built from the VAR. So from the VAR, they use the various decomposition to summarize the table. So we are neglecting the coefficient of the VAR. From your point of view, is by neglecting the coefficient, will it lead to some incorrect estimation?
I think I mean, like I say, yeah, you should teach me on that method, because I do not come across with that method yet. Perhaps you are the one in the front here today. I'm the one in history, right? What method again you said? What's the name of it?
The connectedness approach. So we are using the various decomposition. So from the various decomposition table, we make a summary. So by making the summary, we neglect the coefficient of the VAR, and normally it's a common practice. So by not looking on the coefficient of each on the VAR table, is it we will miss out some important thing, or actually the variable is not significant, but however in variance decomposition, it will become significant.
I do not know the approach really. Yeah, I do not know the approach. As like I say, I'm not updated as you. So if you mind that you can send me some of the article that use that approach, and I'll see how from there. But based on what you asked, I would say that it goes back to the objective of the research. What's the research objective? What do you want to find out? I mean, what actually you want to explore? It goes back to the objective. If the objective is to explain on the coefficient, then perhaps this method might not be the suitable one. So it goes back to the objective of the study, and it doesn't matter how is the derivation. I mean, how complicated a method is. It goes back to the objective. Why the question always everyone should ask is that, why adopt this method? Not every new methods come out, I have to adopt. That's not correct. Why I need to adopt this method? Is it answer back to my objective? Is it answerable back to my objective? If it's not, then why you use that? Why use such a method? Just prove that you know the method. And if looking into that, that's a very interesting question, because and looking into that based on what I don't know the method. It is based on variance decomposition. Variance decomposition is built on VAR. So there's two sides of the coin. I would say that one side is that it depends on the objective. The other side, I would say that perhaps the information that you say might be neglected inside there was actually already embedded inside there, because it's built in VAR, and from VAR you get variance decomposition. So from this variance decomposition, you connect, or you explain in such a way, that summarize in such a way that actually, although it seems like do not link back or do not explain any of the coefficient inside the VAR, but actually it's supposed to be embedded inside there also, already inside the variance decomposition. From my understanding, but I do not know the method. So please do share some of the papers that related to that. All right. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Prof.
Okay, thank you for everybody in online Zoom, Zoom meeting, and in my classroom. Thank you very much, Dr. Lau. I think we have the point, the first point is as long as the data is time series data, the FAR method, I think we can be used by FAR method, the FAR analysis. And then FAR can be used in any scientific field, not only in economics. Thank you very much for Dr. Lau, Evan Lau. I hope the connection internet is unstable, because I don't hear Dr. Lau, Evan Lau.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation today. I hope this time making the benefit for science, our science today. Thank you for students, from Dr. Evan's students and my students here. And I think I, as a moderator, Desi Rahmawati, I am sorry if I have any mistake in bringing this event. The event which have to solve is beneficial for all of us. Thank you for your attention, and Dr. Evan Lau, for sharing your research. Maybe next weekend collaboration. Thank you very much for Dr. Evan and students. Okay, so I think the session guest lecture today is finished. Thank you for your attention, guys, and Dr. Evan Lau. See you again in the session, our session. Goodbye, everybody. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I permission to leave, Dr. Ivan.
Yes, so.